Since Frank Lampard took the reins at Chelsea at the start of the 1920 season, the West London outfit have generally impressed as an attacking unit. However, defensively speaking, they've been far less convincing, until now. Last season, the Englishman's side conceded 54 goals, the most of any team in the top 10 and the Blues' highest total in the Premier League this century. However, in the opening 9 games of the 2021 season, it's been a very different story, with a much improved backline conceding a mere 10 goals, second only to Jose Mourinho's Tottenham. Although, we should caveat this with the fact they've only played 2 of the traditional top 6 in the league at the time of writing. So, what has changed, and is it high time we start affording Lampard more credit for the speed in which he's addressed his defensive woes? Let's take a look. Lampard actually inherited a pretty sound defensive side, with Maurizio Sarri's Chelsea only conceding 9.2 shots per 90 in the 18-19 campaign, bettered only by Liverpool and Manchester City. The Blues also had the 3rd best expected goals against that season, meaning the quality of chances they conceded was comparatively low to the chasing pack. Basically, Chelsea's defence was of top 4 standard. However, the departures of mainstays such as Gary Cahill and David Luiz meant that a new central defensive partnership needed to come to the fore. This did not happen. Individual errors and bouts of inconsistency led to heavy rotation in defence in the 1920 season, with only club captain Cesar Azpilicueta starting over 25 league games in the Blues' backline. Ultimately, Chelsea recorded fewer clean sheets than 13th place Newcastle. However, this obvious weak spot also meant the club had a very clear directive when it came to recruiting in the summer, and Marina Granovskaya, Chelsea's director of football, plugged the gaps emphatically. So, what do these new players need to do? In order for Chelsea to compete at the top of the table, Lampard's new defensive additions need to improve their team in the following areas. Number 1, set pieces. Chelsea conceded 14 in 2019-20, more than 13 other sides. 2, the defensive transition. The Blues conceded 8 goals in transition last season, the worst in the Premier League. And number 3, dealing with crosses into the box, something that's plagued the side since Thibaut Courtois sailed to Real Madrid. So, have the new signings tick the aforementioned boxes? And do they indeed prove that there wasn't a lot wrong tactically speaking, it was just a matter of upgrading personnel? Nowhere was Lampard's lack of faith more evident than at left back, where Marcos Alonso and Emerson shared 28 starts between them in the Englishman's first full season. The £45 million arrival of 23-year-old England international Ben Chilwell has at least put an end to this selection headache, with Chelsea identifying him as a player that can contribute going forward without being a liability in transition. This was something levelled at Alonso, who was nicknamed Alon's Slow by sects of the Chelsea faithful who bemoaned his recovery pace, despite the Spaniard achieving a top speed of 36.55 km per hour in March of 2020, faster than Ben Chilwell's season best of 34.7. The pair put up very similar numbers in one-on-one situations too, with Alonso beaten by his man 1.2 times per 90 versus Chilwell's 1.1. However, the former Leicester star's ability to progress the ball up the pitch at pace and sustain build-up play in the final third is clearly superior. In 2019-20, the Englishman carried the ball an extra 67 yards per 90 compared to the Spaniard, as well as completing over 1 extra pass in the final third per game, something that no doubt appealed to Chelsea, who, particularly under Lampard, do the overwhelming majority of their progression down the flanks. So, how has Chilwell taken to his new surroundings? In his first 6 Premier League games under Lampard, the left-back has averaged fewer tackles and interceptions per 90 than both his predecessors, largely unsurprising given their dominance in those fixtures. He has, however, tightened up in 1v1 situations and proved particularly adept at stopping crosses, with 2.8 blocks per 90, the most in the squad. In short, the left-back's best work is being done in the opposition's half. Centre-back. Kurt Zouma eventually staked his claim as a regular starter midway through the 2019-20 campaign, but finding a partner for the Frenchman proved a struggle, with Christensen and Rudiger given fewer than 1,800 minutes. This is no longer an issue with the introduction of 36-year-old Thiago Silva. So far this season, Chelsea have kept 7 clean sheets in all competitions, with Zouma and Silva the central defensive partnership in 5 of them. Predictably, this is already a huge improvement on last season's showing, where the Blues' longest stretch of clean sheets was a paltry 2 games, something they could only replicate 3 times. In Silva, Chelsea get to have their cake and eat it. He has the ball-playing ability that Christensen brought to the side, and then some, but with greater defensive nous. Although a small sample size, Silva is already averaging 100 passes a game with a 93% pass accuracy. He's also playing a team-high 6.4 accurate long balls per 90, giving Chelsea both poise and variety at the back. It's also worth noting that Silva didn't feature in Chelsea's second worst defensive showing of the season, a 3-3 draw with Southampton. Perhaps this is an indication that his best quality is the way that he galvanises the rest of the back line. To Lampard's credit, whether he was playing a 4 or a 3 in 2019-20, they were mostly solid, with XG determining that they should have conceded far less, ranking them the 5th tightest defence in the division. This isn't exactly title-winning form, but it's a decent enough platform for their substantially better attack to ensure safe passage into the UCL places. However, should the Chelsea board harbour greater ambitions after a high-spending summer, the gains need to be more than marginal. This brings us nicely to the biggest discrepancy in last season's underlying numbers: the goalkeeper. In 1920, Kepa Arrizabalaga, the most expensive goalkeeper in football history, had a historically bad campaign. Based on the calibre of chances that he faced, XG determined that the former Bilbao man should have conceded around 28 goals. Instead, the Spaniard, bereft of confidence after a series of high-profile mistakes, conceded 35. Unsurprisingly, this meant he had the lowest save percentage in the Premier League. Unlike some of his peers, time away from the game during lockdown appeared to do him no favours either, and his poor form continued in the opening exchanges of the 2020-21 season. Against Brighton on matchday 1, Leandro Trossard's long-range strike meant that Kepa had conceded 9 goals from the last 13 shots that he'd faced on target. It also meant he conceded 19 efforts from outside the box since arriving on English shores, the most of any goalkeeper in that period. Life under Edouard Mendy, however, Chelsea's £22 million signing from Rennes, couldn't have begun in a more positive fashion, with the Senegalese international securing 3 clean sheets in his first 3 Premier League appearances. Despite only signing his first professional contract at 24, Mendy has been making up for lost time in the last 4 years, culminating in a standout campaign in 2019-20, where his hulking frame kept out almost 80% of the shots that he faced. As we flagged prior, one of Chelsea's weaknesses last season was dealing with crosses, especially given Kepa's tendency to stay rooted to his line, something that invited undue pressure on his defence. At 6'6", a whopping 5 inches taller than Kepa, this is less of an issue for Mendy. According to Chelsea, this was no panic buy either, with technical advisor and former goalkeeping legend Petr Cech scouting Mendy, cousin of Real Madrid's Furlon, while he was still at Stade Reims. Just over 6 years ago, the Senegalese stopper was unemployed. Now, he's successfully keeping the world's most expensive goalkeeper out of the team. However, the most important facet to return to the side could well be an inform N'Golo Kante. In his first 2 seasons at Stamford Bridge, the Frenchman averaged 5.8 tackles and interceptions, missing only 5 league games in the process. However, the sheer amount of minutes he put up and his combative style of play appeared to be taking its toll by the end of the 2019-20 season, where his defensive stats dropped by almost 33%, missing 14 games in the process owing to a string of muscle injuries. This season, the 29-year-old is starting to resemble something close to his best, putting up almost 6 tackles and interceptions while completing a team-high amount of pressures. Plus, with Mason Mount dropping deeper, Chelsea have an energetic midfield capable of winning the ball back quickly after ceding possession that's not overly dependent on the Frenchman's superhuman output. Yes, Lampard's men are yet to face some of the more potent attacks in the Premier League, but that's not to say this form is unsustainable or an unfair representation of the fairly substantial progress they've made at the start of this season. Not only were they already relatively solid, but they've addressed the 3 key areas with some shrewd recruitments. More importantly, these moving parts have already been successfully embedded into the side. The only major concern appears to be an increasing reliance on the fitness of 36-year-old Thiago Silva. Even then, Chelsea have options to bring back into the fold. However, coaching a good defence and a great defence are 2 very different things, and now Lampard has the tools, there's a pressure to deliver the results. So guys, that was FD Explained for another week. What do you want to see us cover next time round? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you next time.